James Joyce. I don't know. I just for the first time noticed that you have the full name instead of just JJ. And
this is going to mess up my my intention to string all the Jim Joyces together.
No, but at the same time though, I don't know if you've ever seen that graphic of Startup Life where it's like oh yay, right? So the James will be the OAA.
We gotta switch it up. We gotta switch it up,
man.
How are you this fine Wednesday?
It's Wednesday.
Right.
Hump day. Was looking forward to this.
100%.
Every Wednesday. I really don't know what we're gonna do after we, wrap this up end of October-ish. I don't know. We'll decide. I'm gonna need to get another hobby or start cheating on you.
Right. We'll see. Yeah, maybe
we'll see what happens. Before we get to our guests, so we're kind of hopping back over, from US to EU again. I think again, I've been so I had no idea what's going on politically. I had no idea, in the last week, coming up for air. And I just saw something, Erin Brodwin from Stat News just published, and I know the news is all out there. Maven it just became a billion company, right? That's a big news. Kudos to the team there. And then we'll leave the rest to our friends, Matthew and Jess. So that's it. And anything from you? I don't know. Any news? How you doing? What's going on?
Yeah, no, we're up to a lot. Not all of it public. We're up to a lot. I hear you. Public. Maybe someday it will be all public. We'll see.
As things mature, you get them out there, right? So all good.
Exactly.
I was more thinking about your mental health and how, because I know you've also been just landed on Monday or something, and just craziness, right? So
just off it was great. I just off a plane Sunday. Monday night have a bit of jet lag in me, that's kind of I miss it a little bit, miss being on the plane. So I've done my traveling anyway. So let's get our guest in. We'll bring all
right, last not that there's any really room anymore, I'm really looking forward to my fireside chat with Glenn Tolman tomorrow. It's happening, so I'm super excited. It will be in person. We've sort of, cut down on the number of people that can be. And obviously gonna ask kindly for people to wear masks. It's not a, requirement from a state law in New York, but, we will ask kindly. And of course, I will lead by example until I'm talking to Glenn. Anyway, let's get Tobias Silberzahn in. He's a partner at McKinsey in Germany, but we'll let him give us his full introduction and history about him and his passions. There he is, Tobias.
Hello.
Hey.
Tobias, Jim, Tobias.
Pleasure to meet you.
I don't know if you guys have met.
And you don't go. It's Tobias, not Tobias. That's the right.
Well, I'm married to an English lady, so half of the family says Tobias, and but I would say Tobias. But I'm fine either way.
Excellent. I probably even butchered your last name too, even though mine is not any easier. So, but
no worries at all.
But give us.
With you, how's life?
We kind of did the little, up, down, sideways, pushing along. Just
we were looking forward to you. Eugene's been talking about your phenomenal background in the whole area of health and digital health and McKinsey, and so we're looking for you. Kind of pump up our Wednesday.
We're gonna suck your energy out a bit.
I thought he was talking about my virtual background, but the other background
that too.
Is fine too.
That too. So tell our millions of listeners and viewers who you are and how you came to doing health tech stuff at McKinsey.
Cool. Yeah, happy to, and thanks for having me. Thanks for the invitation. Well, I guess from a professional perspective, I'm a biochemist, immunologist, and and a person just who was thinking about it, what to do with the second half of their career a few years back, and then I decided, having had lots of health issues in my family, cancer and other stuff, and being a biomedical researcher, that for me it's both meaningful and exciting to dedicate the second half of my career to healthcare innovation, which these days is a lot of digital health and health tech.
Second half, like, so what were you, 12? Up, you look like you're 25, like, you know.
Well, my wife is a fashion designer, so she recently said, "What am I planning to do about my gray hair?" But I'm happy that it doesn't really show up on Zoom.
I thought also she like helps you set up with the best way you look, with the lighting, the background, you know, all of that as well. So, but
we are just about to have our 10-year wedding anniversary, and I can tell you, I got a lot of free fashion advice in the last 10 years.
Excellent.
As a consultant would say, my wife thought that there was a lot of improvement potential.
So where are you calling us from, Tobias? Or
I'm in Berlin. I'm in Berlin.
Okay. And you're originally from Berlin?
Yeah, originally I'm from a tiny village in the south of Germany. It's 200 people, and it's a very rural place. But now I live in Berlin. Met my British wife in London when I did research, and I work pretty much across Europe on healthcare innovation topics, mostly with digital health companies, medtech companies, pharma companies, sometimes ministries of health. And topic-wise, it's usually somewhere between R&D and product development and commercialization and business building at the other end of the spectrum. And and privately married, 2 kids, as said. We just had a big milestone. Our son started school on Monday. And back from holiday. So I guess now the second half of the year has seriously started. Back from holiday, I then did something that I haven't done for a while in the pandemic, flying. I was at the HIMSS conference last week in Las Vegas, my first flight in a year.
Oh, wow.
Were you there as well?
We did not go, at least, well, I know you didn't either. So we did not choose to attend.
So how was it?
Yeah, tell us.
Yeah, it was amazing. Of course, for a German person,
the Vegas part or the HIMSS part?
I was just saying for a German person who went to Las Vegas for the first time in their life, that was also an experience. But I love the conference. And seeing where sort of digital health is going, both with the young companies, but also then with the more established companies, and but then also just to get together with people, right? This was the first time in a year that I actually flew. So it was a great event, and I'm particularly excited about the new HIMSS Accelerate platform, right? I'm not sure whether you've heard about it. It's a platform where they try to bring the global healthcare community together. So that's what I'm also currently playing around with. It's a bit like LinkedIn purely for healthcare people as a base functionality, right? And then there are different domains. One domain around training, professional development, right? Physician education, nurse education, health IT education. Then there's a whole other domain, which I personally find most exciting, the digital transformation domain, right? Trying to bring together sort of demand of digital transformation, like hospitals, health systems, integrated delivery networks, with the supply side of digital transformation, and sort of bring a little bit more order into the chaos, I guess. And then, of course, also some research, insights, thought leadership. So that was sort of what I actually really liked seeing.
Before we dive into digital transformation, because I want your thoughts on this. Yeah, I know Vegas is typically, what happens here stays here kind of thing, but can you tell us, and
Come on.
Can you tell us, I don't know, if there was like an exciting thing, like the big aha moment from the actual conference, some interesting company that, and I'm not asking you to pick, but or a trend, something that was kind of the big aha, or was the Accelerate something that was kind of your go-to?
Yeah, the Accelerate piece was I would say the thing that I found really cool, and then the other stuff, I look across digital health in my sort of, way of thinking about sort of 25 different categories, right, from online appointment booking to patient remote monitoring, clinical decision support, telemedicine, and digital therapy. So I'm sort of looking at that, and I'm excited to see how it increasingly merges, right? What was sort of 25 very separate categories a few years ago is now increasingly merging into these broader digital health ecosystems, right? Where then, some of them are being built in the US, some of them are being built in Europe. And then when I look in Asia, right there, they have reached already quite an enormous scale, right? If we look at some of the ecosystems out there, 300 million, 400 million people being served with a set of digital health services, and often also then sort of tying that around the brick and mortar kind of services. That's something that I find exciting. And I guess to conclude the intro, right? What I then also find
we're never going to conclude the intro.
Yeah, exactly.
So we're just gonna.
I guess maybe the other nugget where then it was a lot of catching up is the health tech network that I've had the pleasure of leading for a few years. That is, when I started that, or I rather took it over, it was not my idea. It was sort of a mini network of 30 British digital health companies, I think 4 or 5 years ago. And then I was asked whether I would take over when my colleague was going on secondment. And then I asked a few health tech CEOs sort of what would be helpful for you. And then they said, Tobias, please don't start another pitch event. They felt, at least the European ones that I knew well, that there are enough of them there, right? Nothing against pitch events. Right. Then they said, but it would be nice to have something where health tech CEOs and founders can discuss with each other what life really is like, right? Since pitch events, it's often a bit competitive, right? And everyone seems to claim that they are close to world domination and stuff like that. So then I just thought, well, why don't we do that? And so I started doing that, and without really thinking a lot, I set it up as a global health tech network. And now retrospectively, that's what seemed to have resonated with people, right? Because from that tiny British health tech network of 30 companies, now we are almost at 1,000 health tech companies globally, right? And it's sort of 25 regional groups from Canada to Australia. And of course, then there was also a lot of catching up with those folks at HIMSS 21. And that's great to see how quickly these companies grow up, right? And I'm a bit a person in that triangle between sort of the young emerging digital health companies, right? The pharma and medtech companies that are very, established companies, and then a bit like also the ministries of health here in Europe. Right? In that sense, it's just amazing to see how quickly these tech companies grow up, right? That's why I also don't call it a startup network anymore, right? Because every other week there's another IPO, SPAC deal, or merger. And so in that sense, it would be deeply unfair to call this industry segment startups anymore. So that's what I'm also excited about, just seeing them grow up and taking meaningful roles and actually creating a benefit for citizens and patients.
So. And Jim, I'm sure there's so much to unpack in the health tech network. I do want to maybe jump. Well, actually, let's stick with the health tech network, right? So I think when you and I caught up, Tobias, a couple of months back, you kind of told me about it. It's interesting. I'm always a little bit challenged, right? Because a network, when you're part of such a large network, like you mentioned, right, 1,000. At the end of the day, Jim and I catch up. There's, just as an example, right? There's entrepreneurs. You sort of building the companies together. You lean on each other, and I think part of that, some of that is artificial in a sense when there's a network created. Like, how do you find it? And there's other, every accelerator has some kind of a set of sessions. So I'm just curious, like, how you seen a lot of this developing, because it is people work with people and relationships, right? So
yeah,
like, maybe talk a little about the engagement between the entrepreneurs in the health tech network.
Yeah. So there's been quite a few. There are a few network effects that I find impressive how surprising and impressive as they unfold, right? First of all, I just thought that this is for health tech CEOs and founders, right? And as that network grew and people seemed to like together, right? And, there was still a bit of that, I'm the lonely CEO and founder, and the burden of this company and the fundraising is all on me, right? And I then meet other people and can sort of share experience with them. I think that was one part that people seemed to like. The other part was also just to share real experiences, right? Because often, towards accelerators, incubators, right? Everyone talks about their successes, right? We also often talk about, whether a company also spent 2 years negotiating with another entity and then nothing really came from that. So in that sense, we tried to set it up in a collegial, friendly atmosphere. But the other thing that I was surprised about was that then, as the health tech network grew then, and also with digital health picking up, increasingly lots of other people became interested in that, right? So there are actually now 2 networks. There is the health tech network with roughly 1,000 CEOs right now. And then there is another community that doesn't really have a name. We just call it the Friends of the Network, right? And that's now also almost 300 people. And I would say half of them are investors who are then, of course, interested in getting in touch with cool entrepreneurs. And the other half are all sorts of other digital health leaders, right? Like digital health leaders of a pharma company, medtech company, health insurance, hospital, incubators, accelerators, ministries of health, newspapers, etc. And that's what I find fascinating, that there are then collaborations being brokered and people just, also between the CEOs, right? Increasingly with these health ecosystems emerging, right? There are increasingly partnerships between the telemedicine CEO and then the diagnostic at home CEO or the diagnostic platform CEO. So in that sense, they don't see each other. And I like that a lot of British CEOs said at our last in-person roundtable before the pandemic broke out, that, it's such a big space, right? The health system and the chronic diseases and there's actually, if we put a few of those things together, or if a few of those things would be put together into sort of a bigger ecosystems or whatever we want to call it, then it would be actually beneficial for our society, for the companies, right? And an example of that I quite like is that some of the non-for-profits that I see, for example, in the tuberculosis space, the Stop TB, right? They are creating or almost curating, right, an ecosystem where they've looked at what are different digital health companies that actually can help make a difference for people with tuberculosis, right? Especially also then in low and middle income countries. And they almost put together that set of companies where they say, well, this is a company that can do this very well in the tuberculosis space, and this is another company, and they almost play a curator role, right? And this was something that I would have never expected when we started 4 or 5 years ago.
It's an interesting comment you make, right? As far as like, I think entrepreneurs sometimes gloss over the nonprofits, but just because they're not-for-profit entities, that doesn't mean that they don't have money and needs, right? And problems to solve. So I think that's something that entrepreneurs overlook. Jim, I was going to go back to a little bit of the consulting and digital transformation and sort of my own experience. I remember coming into a large pharma, as both of you guys know. And I remember asking the question almost every day, what does digital and digital transformation mean to you as an individual in this company? And if I ask 100 people, I would get almost 100 different answers, because it's looking at their silo function, et cetera, which is great for consultants like companies like McKinsey. It's, the more sort of ecosystem stuff that looks on the slide is how do you put it all together and how do you advise? But I'm actually curious, from HIMSS or from your last number of years, McKinsey, how is it, at least for life sciences, how you guys are looking at this as a digital transformation? What is it?
Well, I think there are a few levels, right? I'll focus on 3, right? There is the country angle, right? And I'm extremely excited about that from just that citizen perspective. How then, if we think about it, the future of health, right? How 4 things come together, right? We've got all these traditional medical interventions, right? Like the implants and in the exams, etc. Right? Then we've got now 20, 30, 50, depending on how granular we go, digital health solutions, right? Patient remote monitoring, telemedicine, etc. Then we've got the whole angle of health and well-being, which we should also talk about a bit, where then, sleep, nutrition, fitness, stress management, and keeping people healthy and happy. And then we've got the whole precision medicine, genomics type stuff, right? Where then countries like Denmark with their National Genome Center, they are already thinking about how can we actually do a personalized health system. And so in that sense, the digital transformation on a country level, I find it incredibly exciting. How do we, and with we, I mean pretty much any country, how do we want to rethink healthcare so that it actually creates benefits for our citizens and our system, right? Then there is the second level, which is the company digital transformation, right? Where then you can have digital products and services, you can have digitized processes like digital R&D, right? It's sort of internal digitization, and then you can have digital customer engagement, which is of course also a massive topic, right? And that's sort of happening with pharma and medtech companies, and there I'm supporting a medtech company on their digital transformation. And then finally, there is the digital transformation of the citizen, right? And that is something that I'm also thinking very much about, because I lead the health and well-being initiative for McKinsey Germany and Austria, right? So I think about, it's a bit more than 3,000 people, right? Where it's like, okay, these are citizens, right? These are in many cases healthy, right? Where then we think about how can actually digital help a person like Eugene or Jim, right? To be happier, healthier, and stay healthy, right?
I have an answer. Everybody needs a health coach. Everybody needs a person to lean on.
I thought we were all going to go to Vegas. I thought that was the answer.
Hey, whatever happens there stays there.
Shall we conference in a health coach too?
Yeah. So of these 1,000, so sorry to take it back a little bit, but of the 1,000 CEOs that you're interacting with, how many of them did they all go to Vegas?
Well, there were quite a few American ones, right? But the European ones generally didn't go.
And was everything so are of these, like, so, and you mentioned this really quickly going before, just sorry to bring it back to the health tech network, is for these, like, since you have such a sense of these CEOs, are they all being offered buyouts for SPACs right now, or how are you looking at that?
Well, I just spoke with one CEO of the health tech net, one of the German ones yesterday, and he was like, just doing a financing round, and he's being proactively contacted by VCs without him reaching out, but VCs reaching out and asking him whether he wants to work with them. And I've also heard from, right, there are more than 100 VCs as friends of the network, right? I also heard that, they see those sometimes CEOs pretty much sending around term sheets and saying, this is sort of what we offer. Do you want to be part of it? So in that sense, it's currently quite an interesting situation.
Wild West. Wild West.
And as a digital transformation, like, how are you guys looking at that? Like, with that whole, because this seems such an unusual time right now, like for, if you're doing digital transformation and you're building this health tech network, like, what an interesting time where all this money's been raised and they have to do acquisitions in a relatively tight period of time. Like, how are you, advising on that, or what's your take on that space right now?
Yeah, so it's different things, right? So we are doing quite a bit of health tech business building work, right? And that can mean either that we help startups scale, right? And that is one of the things that we are very excited about, helping tech companies scale. And I'm part of the health tech piece, right? Then a good friend of mine is leading our biotech piece. But then there's also corporate business building in the health tech and digital health space, right? Where then increasingly now retailers, mobile phone companies, all sorts of companies, right, are trying to enter the health tech space. And I've also had the pleasure to advise some of them, very established companies in one industry now entering healthcare and building that. That is sort of a lot of the work that I've been doing over the last a couple of years, right? Plus then the the more, I would say, classical digital transformation work, where you are working with a medtech company, a pharma company, a health insurance, or a hospital on their digital transformation, right? That is both going on. We are also working a lot with digital health companies on their growth strategies and equity stories, and that part of the scaling, right? There is the physical business building part of the scaling, right, where I would be providing, I don't know, software developers or IT architecture people or designers, right? Physical designers, virtual. But then there's also the more classical corporate finance strategy work. So that's a bit the kind of work that I do.
But yeah, so you're not, because I have to admit, other than reading about it in the news and a few friends of mine I haven't got drawn too much into this. Like Eugene, you haven't really got drawn into the whole SPAC thing. Like,
I mean, we just mention it every time you and I talk on Wednesdays here. but I mean, look, everybody has their view on the SPACs, right? I think it's a good vehicle. Some people think it's for B-rated companies. Some people say it's the way to go, right? I think there'll be fans and there'll be naysayers, just like for everything else we do. Yeah. I'm personally a little bit skeptical on the SPACs for earlier stage sort of digital companies. I do think that if you have a sound business and the economics are there, why not go through an IPO process? Yes, it will cost money. I mean, you're paying 10% to the SPAC owners anyway, right? So, it can, I don't know. I think we can probably argue or debate it or whatever, for an hour just on that alone. But
I think what's exciting about it, and then I want to ask you, just you're sitting in Berlin there, and so I think it's just fantastic that there's all this capital, right? Like it's whether it's IPOs or venture capital or mergers and acquisitions or SPAC deals, is exciting that there's so much attention being played at this. And I think then one of the other things that's really exciting is what's going on in Germany, with DiGA, where the government has turned around and tried to back digital health companies with regulations. And so are you looking at that, or what's your take on the whole DiGA progress?
It's actually, and this wasn't scripted, right? But it's actually the focus chapter of this year's eHealth Monitor, right? It's
none of it is.
Book. Sorry,
Tobias, I think you've noticed we're very meticulously unproduced. we're all over the map and pulling you. So So the eHealth Monitor is a book that a couple of people, including myself, have started. It's an annual book, right? It's a little bit like an annual report kind of thing. Where does the digital transformation of the German health system stand overall, right? Because we thought, what was it, almost 2 years back, right, that there are all those surveys and here an article, there an article, right, but there was no real sort of overview, and right, and so in that sense we do that now annually, right? The next one will now also be a real book, right? We were contacted by a publisher after we sort of self-printed the first report, and the publisher said, the book is really nice, but why did you do such a terrible job in self-printing it, right? It looks like an advertising brochure. Why don't we do that as a real book? So now the next one will be a proper book. But the cool thing I feel is that tracking sort of annual progress about the digital transformation of a health system, right? There is then the regulatory piece, where of course there have been quite a few laws in the last few years, right? Then there is the infrastructure piece. There is the demand piece, there is the acceptance piece, there is the usage piece, right? And then me as both a biomedical scientist and a citizen, I'm most excited about the benefit and the evidence, right? And of course, interoperability and cybersecurity and data privacy and all of that, it's all very important, right? But for me as a citizen, and also for me as a person who leads a health and well-being program, right, I usually don't get to data security and cybersecurity and these clauses, right? Because I look at something usually in the first step about what is the benefit that this brings, right? And often then, we don't find
Now, if we look at it from a health and well-being perspective, right, we often then don't find that much benefit in quite a few things, and then we never need to go into the cybersecurity, right? But if we look at the benefit and the value from a health system level, then I think the story becomes very interesting, right? You know, of course, digital health then helps people change their behavior, which is then, of course, a massive deal with coaching, but also with chronic diseases. You know, then Jim, I usually then look a little bit less around how much money is being invested. I try to look at what is the value that a certain digital health category can bring to the health system, right? So if we take, for example, patient remote monitoring as an example, right? And when we look at all the academic literature about patient remote monitoring, and then if you would say, if that was 100% implemented in a country like Germany, it would, of course, help a lot of people change their behavior sustainably, which is currently difficult by meeting a doctor 10 to 15 minutes short, right? But from a system level, just if the published academic evidence at this current level would come true, it would be a 3.3 billion euro save on. And now coming back to your question around
billion. So if
3.3 billion,
if all the people that needed remote patient monitoring got devices and they got them into the home and the system was set up, it would be a $3.3 billion savings to the German healthcare system.
Yeah, based on the published evidence of patient remote monitoring in the academic literature.
And have you guys produced a report on that? That's fascinating. That we've
done it for, I think it was 25, 26 categories, right? From online appointment booking to digital therapeutics and patient remote monitoring. Then this was one category, right? So in that sense, we went through like 500-600 academic papers on e-health and sort of classified it, modeled it out, and linked it to the spend buckets of the health system. Right, but coming back to the DiGAs, that is then, of course, when I look at Germany, right, I look at 5 categories, usually at different European countries. The first one is where do we stand on electronic patient records? The second one is where do we stand on e-prescription? The third one is where do we stand on telemedicine or teleconsultations? The fourth one is where do we stand on patient remote monitoring? And the fifth one is where do we stand on digital therapeutics? Right, and if we then do a cross-country comparison in Europe, right, then we have, for the electronic patient record, Germany is still in catch-up mode, right? We sort of started it, and I think as of January this year, right, all of the public health insurances need to provide these electronic patient record apps. But the downloads so far have been pretty low. Right, so there I would say there are other countries in Europe that are further ahead, right? Sweden, UK, a lot further ahead. But then the second category, e-prescription.
Sorry, Tobias, just a quick question. Sorry to just interrupt there, Tobias. There was I think the N26 founder started a company in Germany that was trying to help like Allianz work. I can't remember the name, but that was sort of, I think, an attempt, right? And I think there were some challenges around, I'll call it trust, right? People's trust around a lot of this. So I don't know if you from the, Yeah,
there was, first of all, what is the legal and regulatory framework, right? Then the second piece is, of course, also what is the actual technical infrastructure, right? And what of the technical infrastructure needs to then be provided by whom, right? What is provided by the technological agency of the country? What is provided by the health insurances, right? What is then provided by digital health? So in that sense, it's quite a complicated setup, right? And they are, Germany is sort of catching up on both electronic patient records and its usage, right? And e-prescription. We just sort of started the e-prescription pilots 1st of July this year. They are in pilot stage, right? And if we then look at the digital therapeutic category, which is then the DiGA process, right? That's the one out of the 5 categories where then Germany is sort of the front runner worldwide, right, by having that integrated regulatory and reimbursement pathway.
Who do you think usually like if you look at this, who do you think wins, right? Like if you like on the digital, the most modernized digital health European country in 5 years from now, like, that has like
Estonia.
You think it's Estonia?
I mean, I think we need to also put some parameters around how many people live in that country, right? And not to say everything is relative, right? But I think to
Like
organize
per capita.
I actually would, my bet would actually be on like Netherlands. And maybe
Really?
I'm biased. I don't know. I just, to be honest, I don't have like enough data points. I'm not tracking all the EU countries, right? But
I feel like the UK and Germany are the most robust in terms of their approach and the most complicated and slow, right? Meaning they're just so thorough when they're thinking, and they're so robust, and they actually have infrastructure, and then they end up in all kinds of, there's trouble implementing, right? So they can't operate deftly. Like Netherlands is a good bet. What do you think? Tobias? Who do you think wins, like in the digital health battle?
Well, the last really thorough cross-country comparison was done by the Bertelsmann Foundation end of 2018, and there Estonia was number 1, Canada was number 2, Denmark was number 3, Israel I think was number 4, and Spain was number 5 out of 17. So I guess Eugene, with your Estonia bet, you are pretty good.
But who are you betting? Who are you betting on, Tobias?
In the next 5 years or whatever, it's next 2021, right? Yeah, 2025.
Jim, it's a great question, and I think it depends a bit what we are looking at, right? If we look at that fourth category that we talked about a bit earlier, how do we reimagine our health systems from a precision medicine perspective, right? And how do we bring also stuff like genomics into play, right? Then I would say Denmark is pretty far in the game. Yeah. But what I find cool about that, I'm not sure if you covered that in your series, right? But what I find cool about the National Genome Center in Denmark, right? They thought about it. How do we actually want to serve our citizens with this? Right, and then the different pieces of the puzzle is the genomic sequencing labs. Then there are secret sort of terror-proof biobanks where this whole material is being stored. Then there is a supercomputer that is then crunching the numbers. Then they've thought about a layer of clinical decision support, right? So that, Jim, if you are my Danish doctor in Copenhagen and I'm your Danish patient, right, that you actually have tools to interrogate my data, right? And what does this now mean if Tobias has this kind of mutation? And then there's also a plan to then sort of track outcomes over time, right? And that could actually be really cool from a health system perspective, right? If we then say, okay, there was this cohort of, 10,000 people with that kind of cancer, and here is the different interventions that were done, and sort of looking back after 5 years or 10 years, where do we stand, right? Which are the interventions that work best in our country?
I think the analysis that should be done is you should take the quality of the airport, and that's going to be the best predictor of the quality of the information. And if that's the case, it's definitely Copenhagen. Definitely Denmark is going to win that one.
So we're not mentioning the new Berlin airport then, right? Yeah. Okay. I know. I don't remember who was a guest, but like, stop mentioning it. Like, they actually got ticked off at me, I think.
Yeah. Ireland has a chance only because Health Beacon's here, and we're going to help transform the Irish healthcare system. That's my.
I like it.
But Tobias, we're under, like, Eugene has to go run his, like, you and I are in the
we actually, you guys are in the evening, unfortunately, and I'm not trying to cut us, but Marina and I have back-to-back VC meetings right after this.
So for like a simple, elegant piece of advice for a young entrepreneur that is living in Berlin, that's a former biochemist, that used to be a consultant, that's married to an English woman, and that decides to go out on his own, despite the fact that he has 2 kids, and decides to go out and start his own company, what advice would you give that young entrepreneur right now setting up a digital healthcare company?
Well, I would. That's a very good question. And by the way, my wife is waiting. We'll hang out this evening on Wednesday.
Excellent.
But I think what is exciting is then really the patient angle, right? And it might sound trivial, but working with some of the nonprofits in the patient organization space, right? Where I often do a bit of coaching just to sort of help these people, right? I find it fascinating how many patients and patient organizations, right, are only contacted when sort of the digital health solution is 99% done, right? And you know, I hear that over and over again from the patient leaders that I work with and that I know, right? That why don't people ask us a lot earlier, right? And why do they come with a pretty much finished product, right? Often then the company has won 1 or 2 awards, right? And are very proud, and they pretty much come to the patient organization and to say, look, what cool stuff we have done, right? And how we can now help you, right? And usually it doesn't really hit the mark with the patient. Maybe I'm working with very critical patients, right? But that's a theme that I hear, and that's the kind of advice that we could give, maybe not only that Berlin person.
Yeah, I mean, fully agree. And I think it was Lucien, Engelen that kind of back in the days, so there was like a hashtag patients included. And I just, just a quick shout out to Jen at Savvy Coop, co-op. I don't know if you guys know them. I think they've been built some amazing stuff. So really, really good advice. And for the millions of listeners and viewers, hit that subscribe button again. Make sure you subscribe, pass this on. And thank you, Tobias. And enjoy your evening with your wife.
Enjoy your evening with your wife.
Thanks for having me. Nice to meet you, Tim.